If I asked you which is your favorite Need for Speed, you might say Most Wanted or Carbon. And I get it, those are absolute classics. But when I think about childhood, I don't know. It feels like the first game from the franchise that pops into my head is Underground 2. I can't even say if it's truly my favorite, but it feels like it carved out a piece of my life, you know? There was nothing better than coming home from school, turning on my PlayStation 2, and playing without a thought for tomorrow and no worries. I mean, it's not just about what the game was, the customizations, the incredible open world, other race types like at the airport, and so on. It's the vibe or energy it radiated from the inside out that makes it connect with me in a different way. Underground 2 came out back in 2004, as the sequel to the first Underground, and that's when things got serious. While the first one had already won over a huge crowd with neons and street racing, Underground 2 brought a fully formidable open world, Bayview, that felt alive. I couldn't play it at launch, but I had the pleasure of playing it at the peak of my childhood. The point I want to bring up today is this. Why does this game, even though it's not the favorite of most people or the most revolutionary in the series, carry this pure feeling of childhood like no other? Visual style that defined a generation. Now, let me tell you something that always gets me when I think about Underground 2. The visuals of that game. It wasn't just about street racing, I don't know. It was the way it made me feel inside that world. The color palette, for instance, was something that stuck in my head. I remember turning on the PlayStation 2 at night, and the dark streets of Bayview would light up the screen, with that deep black sliced through by neon lights glowing in green, purple, blue. It was a contrast that left such a mark on me that sometimes I'd stop the car just to stare at the city. When Underground 2 launched in 2004, the game's graphics were a huge leap forward compared to what we'd seen at the time. In the context of the early 2000s, the video game industry was transitioning from an era of simpler graphics to one of greater realism and visual complexity, and Underground 2 stood out as one of the most impressive examples of that evolution. It was one of the first games in the franchise to put such a big focus on vehicle customization. The game let players customize their cars in incredible ways for the time, from mechanical tweaks to aesthetic changes like spoilers, wheels, neon lights, and decals. The level of detail in the car models was stunning, with high-quality textures, realistic reflections, and even wear effects. When you drove through the city, the feeling of being in a pulsing, dynamic urban environment was undeniable. Simple story. Even though the game is one of the biggest in the franchise, I think its story is pretty simple. It all starts with the protagonist, a skilled racer from Olympic City, where he'd earned fame in the first Underground. After receiving a mysterious invitation to a race, he's ambushed. His car is destroyed in a planned accident by Caleb, the leader of the gang, the Wraiths. Injured and without his vehicle, the protagonist is rescued and taken to Bayview, a fictional city buzzing with nightlife and underground competitions. In Bayview, he's welcomed by Rachel Teller, an experienced racer who lends him her Nissan 350Z to start over. The mission is clear: reclaim his status and take on Caleb. Guided by Rachel through text messages, the protagonist explores the city's 5 districts: downtown, Beacon Hill, Jackson Heights, Cole Harbor, and the airport, racing to earn money, reputation, and parts to customize his car. Each victory draws the attention of new rivals and sponsors, while the player unlocks events like Drift, Street X, and the prestigious Underground Racing League. Soundtrack. The curation of Underground 2's soundtrack was a deliberate and visionary choice. Blending genres, alternative rock, hip-hop, and electronic music, the selection captured the essence of a youth immersed in urban subcultures. One of the most iconic tracks is Riders on the Storm, a collaboration between Snoop Dogg and The Doors. This reinterpretation of a 70s classic, with its deep bass and steady rhythm, was the perfect counterpoint to high-speed races, evoking a sense of control and rebellion. Rock, on the other hand, brought intensity to the fiercer competitions. Meanwhile, hip-hop, represented by Terror Squad's Lean Back, added a layer of urban authenticity, while electronic tracks like Paul Van Dyck's Nothing But You wrapped players in a futuristic atmosphere aligned with the game's techie aesthetic. Over 20 years later, Underground 2's soundtrack remains, for me, one of the most balanced and immersive in racing games to this day. No Police. The freedom in Underground 2 hit the spot perfectly. An open world where I could do whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted, with no one to stop me. Unlike other titles in the franchise like Most Wanted or Carbon, where you raced but always had to watch out for the cops, Underground 2 let the player speed around completely free of worry. That turned Bayview into a true nighttime playground, where all I cared about was exploring. The absence of police also made street races even more uninterrupted. There was no fear that, in the middle of a heated showdown, a cop car would show up out of nowhere and ruin everything. It was just you, your car, and your rivals. That made the game much more focused on the tuning and illegal racing culture without needing a punitive system to add stressful challenges. If something went wrong, the blame was almost entirely yours. Another thing that made this freedom so special was how the city was full of secrets. Narrow alleys, hidden shortcuts, unexpected climbs. Exploration was always rewarded. Bayview was a living environment. And of course, you can't forget the unique challenges scattered around Bayview. Finding hidden shops to unlock exclusive parts was almost a game within the game. It was addictive to explore every corner of the city to unlock everything. I still don't think I've found it all. Why so nostalgic? In the early 2000s, racing games were going through a real revolution. Underground 2 arrived in 2004 and quickly became a milestone for an entire generation of players. Today, those who grew up playing this classic are between 20 and 25 years old and carry memories that go far beyond street racing in Bayview. But what makes this game carry such a strong nostalgic weight, even after all these years? Part of the answer lies in the context of the time. From 2004 to 2010, many of us were kids or teens, living in a period where responsibilities were few and time seemed to move slower. It was a different era where turning on the PlayStation 2 or PC was synonymous with freedom. There were no worries about work, bills, or urgent commitments. The nights were long, food was always on the table, and there were no bills to pay. The lack of a hyper-connected world like today also made Underground 2 an even more special experience. There were no social media platforms dominating our attention or constant notifications interrupting the game. Our personal memories are one of the biggest factors. Every player has a different recollection, but they all converge on the same nostalgic feeling. Maybe it was an all-nighter playing with friends in split-screen mode, competing to see who mastered drift curves the best? Or those lively school conversations where everyone debated the best car or the perfect upgrades. For some, Underground 2 was their first taste of the tuned car world. For others, it was the gateway to car culture. The nostalgia of Underground 2 doesn't just come from what it was as a game, but from everything it represented in our lives back then. I don't know about you, but sometimes I forget I'm an adult. When I remember this game, it feels like I want to go back, but the truth is, it's the memory that makes those old moments special. I'm not just talking about games here anymore. I hope you all get to live the best days of your lives in adulthood too. I think that's it. Well, give me some ideas for other gaming topics you'd like me to bring up here. I generally love car games, and if you've made it this far, subscribe.